Hello and welcome back to the Halo series. My name is Douglas Brown, CEO at Halo Consulting. Today we are joined by Angela Williams, the Inclusion and Talent Leader at SRAM. If you're new to this event, Halo hosts monthly virtual roundtables covering current trends in the HR, tech, and AI space. Don't forget to check out the Halo mini-series, where we hear from executives taking a deep dive into a multi-part series discussing what is keeping them up at night. If you've enjoyed this content, hit that like and subscribe button, and be sure to visit Halo's LinkedIn page to subscribe to the Halo Content Hub, which summarizes current market trends and recaps past events, and that link can be found in the description. Throughout our session, we will cover exploring learning and development best practices for post-pandemic success. Before we kick off the questions, let's get started with you, Angela. Can you share with our audience where you started your career and how it has evolved into your role that you have at SRAM today?
I can, but first, thank you, Douglas, for inviting me. I appreciate the opportunity. How I started my career. I started my career actually on the buying side in retail. So I did not start as an HR professional. I was a buyer for a department store for almost 9.5 years. And from there, I moved into our corporate office into an HR position, which was around college recruiting. I continued in HR recruiting for about 6 years with other companies like The Gap. I also worked with Kohl's in a regional HR position. And then I moved myself to Chicago from San Francisco. And that's where I really started learning more about all the other areas that exist within HR outside of just talent acquisition. So I started in talent acquisition at Follett Higher Education Group and did that for a number of years. Then I moved into employee relations. And based on where HR was heading, we were trying to sort of move into being more of a consultative business partner versus just someone seen to sort of handle transactions. And so with the help of the team, we sort of morphed into HR business partner roles. And I did that and then took on additional responsibilities around HRIS and admin. What I will say has been throughout my career is really a passion around people, around DEI and inclusion. And so helping people learn in different ways, making sure that people feel included in conversations, as well as feel empowered that they have the tools to be successful, has always been important to me, and that's what led me here to SRAM. So while I may not be a cycling enthusiast, SRAM is known for cycling, I am enthusiastic about people, which is their biggest resource, and again, one of their biggest priorities. And so coming into this organization to really continue on helping them evolve learning and development and making sure that we are helping bring people along as this industry transforms as well was quite appealing and exciting to me. And that's what landed me here at SRAM.
You've had a really remarkable career, Angela, starting in retail and then, working your way through the different HR functions, ultimately landing at SRAM, and really excited to see what you're able to achieve in the future.
Thank you. Thank you. The one thing I will suggest to anyone is to try new opportunities, be curious, ask questions, and take a risk. Try things that might push you a little bit outside of your comfort level. And that gives you an opportunity to sit in a couple different seats.
Yeah, one internal mantra we have at Halo here is if you're not embarrassed about the work that you did 12 months ago, you're not growing.
I like that.
Let's dive into our first question, Angela. How can organizations ensure that training and development programs are effective in providing team members with the necessary skills to succeed in their roles and beyond?
Organizations to ensure that people are successful, there's a couple of things. I think the first is that organizations have to be aware that people do learn differently. Some people are auditory learners, some people learn by doing, some people just take, a little bit of time to sort of understand the concept and begin to put the pieces together. So even before the pandemic, people were juggling a lot, both in their day job, their personal life, and at the same time, really trying to understand what does that career path look like for me 2, 3, 4 years from now. An organization, not only understanding that people learn differently, but also understanding that people have different priorities and time constraints, and providing training that is agile, that gives people an opportunity to do it in sort of a self-paced environment that allows them to access it from different devices. I hate to say it, but I think we're all connected to several devices during the course of a day. How organizations are looking at learning and development from just that in-person connection. While in-person is great, companies have to be a little bit broader in their approach to look at more blended, where you do pull in some e-learning opportunities as well as continue with some of the in-person offerings that they have.
Yeah, that's some really good context that you touched on, Angela, in terms of the self-paced learning, the online digital classes, and really individuals learning at their own pace. From your experience, what methods have you used in the past to be successful?
I've used a blended learning approach in my past, and even as I'm introducing that here to SRAM. Currently, a lot of what SRAM does today is that in-person learning, and it's great. But I would say as we continue to grow, and we're a global organization, so we have some logistics around different time zones, around trying to pull people together, as well as looking at both technical and soft skill training. So looking at that e-learning to sort of orient or socialize concepts is important. Understanding from the learning perspective what the end user needs to walk away with. What is the objective? If it's informational and you're just trying to share information, e-learning might be the quickest way to do that. If it's really more compliance or it's technical and you really need to gauge someone's proficiency, e-learning does give you the ability to do some pre-tests, do some knowledge checks, as well as, sort of an end of course check to make sure that people are not only understanding the concepts, but also how to apply them. And you look at both technical skills as well as soft skills, both are equally as important. And I think e-learning can really get in and focus on competencies and helping people understand what core competencies look like and build them to be situational and do a little bit of case study or role playing to, again, give them that opportunity to apply some of those competencies.
From your perspective, the e-learning versus the in-person, do you think there's a benefit to one or the other?
No, I don't think there's an either or approach. I think it's an and. And so when I think about, the importance of bringing people together, again, depending on the type of curriculum that you're trying to do, having those group discussions, having those breakout groups, getting people to share sort of their experience is invaluable. I just think, again, if you're looking at trying to do a 2-day, 8-hour in-person class, that might be a tall order if you're a global organization and or depending on how busy the organization is at certain times of the year. But if you can break that down into perhaps 4 learning modules that you do over the course of 2 weeks, and then you bring folks together for, say, a 2 or 3 hour workshop where you have a leader that's walking them through the concepts, the objectives, and then going into those group discussions and those role plays. Again, that's the benefit of both. You're sort of being very efficient with people's time, but you're also maximizing the touch points when you bring them together.
hmm Let's pivot and discuss the role that managers and leaders play in supporting the learning and development of their team while fostering a growth mindset.
Managers play a direct role and a critical role in supporting their teams. And from creating a growth mindset, I think when you look at very successful organizations, it's because they've built a knowledge culture. You've got people that are always curious, always asking questions, be it from a continuous improvement standpoint, but that also helps an organization from an increasing overall talent capabilities. So as an individual manager, first thing that they play a role in is being able to provide skill-based feedback, helping employees understand how they're doing, if they're meeting expectation is critical for employees to be able to continue to develop or feel like there might be other opportunities that they're ready for. And I want to balance that in saying that, sometimes we forget that we all have, the occasional rock star and they're hitting it out of the park every time. So while we may spend a little bit more time supporting or course correcting people that might not be performing up to the expectation, for those that are hitting it out of the park, I challenge them to recognize, be appreciative, champion those folks, and let them know how their work is impacting the team and the organization in such a positive way. But for those that may not be performing as you need them to, and let's be clear, business is moving really fast. And somebody that might have been a rock star 2 years ago in the role could have sort of passed them by a little bit, either on the technology side or just in looking at efficiencies that the team is trying to find. And so really being able to give examples as a manager to an employee about where you see that there are a bit of gaps, and really coming together and creating a plan on how to address those gaps is really important. Again, fostering that mindset of a learning culture really has a manager having to carve out time to have conversations at the employee level around what engages you, what excites you, what do you like about your job today? What role might you see yourself in 2 to 3 years from now? And really having conversations around what competencies they may need to move into other roles. And again, taking the time to talk about what those competencies look like, and what activities and experiences that we can provide to continue to help them grow in that direction.
When we think about the hierarchy within an organization, if it's executives, VPs, directors, and managers, a different approach for fostering a growth mindset if I'm a manager versus a vice president?
A little yes and no. I think there is a different mindset in how it shows up. Meaning, we all are curious, we're all looking to grow, develop. I do think there are competencies that grow across an organization, regardless what level you're at. I do think those competencies are expected to show up differently if you're sitting in the C-suite and we're talking about communication gaps versus if you're a people manager and we're talking about communication gaps. And it's important, as I said earlier, in not only looking at building out learning for technical skills, but also soft skills, because many times those soft skills could be career derailers. And sometimes it's in addition to perhaps coaching, it's going through and understanding some of those competencies, and when they show up correctly, what they look like.
Well said, Angela. Managers and leaders play a critical role in supporting learning and development of their team. And by taking these steps, you create a culture of learning and development that fosters a strong growth mindset, encourages innovation, and drives organization. Yes.
Agreed.
Let's move on to our next question. What are some strategies that you have observed or hope to see implemented in organizations in the future in aiding employees to develop their skill sets, improve their job performance, and simultaneously promote their career growth and progression within the organization?
Well, that's a pretty complex question. Depending on where the organization is in their life cycle, I've worked at organizations that sort of hit it out of the park. And what I mean by that, Doug, is that you do have an employee that feels empowered because they have a place where they can go. They can see different roles at different levels. They can go in and dig a little deeper and see the required competencies for that job. If it's something that they want in the future, they can click a little bit deeper and see what a potential career path might look like to get there. And then it talks a little bit about where they can move both up, down, and across. So one, I don't think that career ladder is an appropriate term. I always say your career is a spider web. Depending on what you're trying to add to your toolbox, you might look across, you might look into a different function. But at the end of the day, if it's getting you where you want to be, that's kind of what we're all looking for. And so for many organizations, it really starts at the basics in understanding what are professional competencies, which recruiting, the talent acquisition side, should be looking at as they bring people into the organization. Once people are in the organization, what are the leadership competencies? Because, as people move into different roles, yes, you'll have people that want to be individual contributors and maybe not manage people. But for people leaders, there's some specific leadership competencies that we should begin to develop early on. And I challenge the managers that, hey, we don't want to start having that conversation when you want to promote someone. Let's have them 3 to 4 months ahead of time and start layering in some of this learning and development to start helping them get ready. Starting with the professional competencies and then applying those competencies that are needed to specific jobs that may not go across the organization, and really helping people understand how that shows up in that position and what the expectations are. are the first steps in really helping employees feel like they can manage, see, have access to a career path, a ladder, and understand, how they can grow within the organization.
I like how you mentioned you should think of your career as like a spider web, having the ability to move down, up, and across to really gain those core experience and skills that you're looking to learn to advance your career.
Yeah, and I go back and ask, what is a manager's role? It's really asking, an employee to really think through some tough questions. If you're a director within finance, do you really want to kind of go the CFO path? And if so, why? And it's not just because you think that's the next step in the ladder, but what is the work that you think is done there? Is that work you enjoy? Is that a passion of yours? Because sometimes you have to realize, and you can do it by having just conversations with folks that might be in those roles, that that's not really what you want to do. You thought it was, but maybe not.
And Angela, the next question that we want to ask, do you think that the remote work or a hybrid workforce can be an advantage to the learning and development of employees, particularly in terms of offering online and digital courses? And if so, what steps can companies take to ensure that their employees have access to such learning opportunities?
That remote or hybrid work itself lends to an advantage or a disadvantage. I do think, as I said earlier, for organizations to really sort of build out that learning culture, having a platform or having a tool that is agile enough that it's easily accessible, that people can use it on multiple devices anywhere, that you've got a robust course curriculum both on the soft skills and technical skills. I think those are the keys to success. The blended approach doesn't really rely on one way, meaning in person or all online. I'm going to see more companies really looking for that blended approach, especially after, no offense, being sequestered in COVID for 2 years. Sometimes you do want that in person connection. And again, if your company is global, you might not be able to physically pull people into a space, but having the opportunity virtually to pull them into a space and still do breakout groups and whiteboarding. I mean, we figured out a lot of ways to leverage technology. I would say, depending on, again, an organization's evolution, pretty close to on par for some in person learning.
Yeah, really taking that blended approach sounds like a good approach, and having the ability to build out that learning culture with being agile and easily accessible can really accelerate the learning and development.
Do a little bit of a DEI piece, that it also makes it a bit more inclusive. So understanding, as I said earlier, that people have a lot of both professional and personal commitments, trying to bring people together physically in a space, 2, 3 days in a row, 6, 7 hours. Well, unfortunately, at least not in my case, does my email stop coming in or my phone stop ringing. So while I might love that I'm in this class and I'm learning, I do realize that there's still work waiting for me when I get back. And companies are trying to be a little bit more intentional in looking at how to maximize and optimize how they bring people together.
The next question, experience, Angela, have you come across organizations that have successfully implemented experiential learning programs for employees? And if so, what implementation strategies or approaches have you found to be effective in fostering a culture of mentorship within an organization?
I have. There are some great companies out there that are doing some really good work around best in class as it relates to e-learning and mentorship, and again, creating a knowledge-based culture. A lot of that starts at the top, at the leadership level. It also requires resources as it relates to different tools and people resources to help with that. One of the things around implementation that I have seen and have partnered colleagues that have what I think done it very well is really understanding and starting with the end in mind. So, what does success look like from all areas, from the participant, from the business, from the key stakeholders, in really spending the time to speak with those individuals and understand what their needs are and how that fits into the organizational strategy. And then sort of building out this roadmap and taking partnerships along the way to make sure that what in the direction you're going in is going to benefit everyone. And so I see learning and development within an organization as sort of being a shared service, meaning everyone in the organization is a customer. And so understanding that, how do I survey my customer to make sure I'm meeting their needs? They're satisfied with what we're putting out, even from a participant level. So looking at it from that lens helps organizations understand that it's going to be more than just technical skill. Adding in things that people feel will benefit them personally is also a way to increase engagement and retention.
Well said, Angela. Are there any e-learning programs or digital courses that you've taken or completed throughout your career that have been beneficial to your success as an HR leader?
I do, and it goes back to that blended approach, initially understanding and learning about like emotional intelligence. I'm a proponent that emotional intelligence is the foundation for everything, as it relates to understanding sort of that shadow that you cast. Courses around emotional intelligence, problem solving is really becoming more important. People that are looking for ways to see continuous improvement. So some fundamental e-learnings or courses or curriculum or strategies that I've seen organizations deploy that really gives them more sustainability on that whole learning culture and increasing talent capabilities sticking. No one person can sort of keep carrying that torch. And one way to make sure that you're planting a seed versus just planting a fully grown flower is that you embed it in everything. You bring the leaders in, you bring managers in, and you just keep pushing it further and further down in the organization so that everybody sees the benefit of it and everybody champions it.
As we wrap up with our final questions, who should reach out to you and why? And what's the best way to connect with you or get in touch with our audience?
Anyone who should connect with me, anyone that is interested in partnering on a learning and development journey that is sort of a mid-sized company, and this might be new to them and they might be global. So anyone that is looking to start, I've done this a few times, so I can help there. But I'm also wanting to talk to folks that, again, are best in class to understand some of their challenges and obstacles and how they were able to get through that. The best way to contact me is either through LinkedIn or through angela.williams at SRAM.com, SRAM.com. That's another way that they can reach me.
Is there anything that you'd like to share or talk about the work that you're doing today at SRAM personally?
You've got to love what you do, and you've got to sort of go into it thinking crawl, walk, run. There's a lot of low hanging fruit. There are a lot of things you're going to want to do, satisfy what you see could be a big need. And in order to do it well and to do it right and to set everyone up to be successful, you do have to sort of pace yourself. You want to ask the right questions and you want to make sure you're taking the appropriate partnerships. But other than that, I'm a big proponent of love what you do.
Gotta love what you do. Thanks for
Mhm.
joining us today, Angela. Continue doing the great work in the HR space and at SRAM, and we're wishing you the best.
Thank you. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, Douglas.